The 8 most horrific massacres in history. History is often written in ink, but some of its most pivotal chapters were written in blood, served on a silver platter. We are conditioned to view the dinner table as a sanctuary of diplomacy and the heights of hospitality as a shield against violence. But throughout the centuries, the invitation to a feast has frequently been used as the ultimate weapon of deception. These are moments where the sacred bond between host and guest was not just broken, but used to facilitate calculated, cold-blooded slaughter. In 1440, Scotland's Edinburgh Castle hosted what would become known as the Black Dinner. The young King James II, a child of 10, was a pawn in a power struggle between the Crown and the formidable Douglas clan. To neutralize the threat, the Earl of Douglas and his brother were invited to a royal banquet. The atmosphere was one of luxury and laughter, until the music died. A servant entered, carrying a covered tray. When revealed, it held the severed head of a black bull, the ancient Scottish symbol of death. Despite the young king's pleas, the brothers were dragged into the courtyard and executed. This betrayal of the guest right was so profound it inspired modern fiction's most famous wedding tragedy. Centuries later, in 1811, Muhammad Ali Pasha employed a similar tactic to consolidate his rule over Egypt. The Mamluks, a powerful military caste, were his greatest obstacle.
He invited them to the citadel of Saladin to celebrate his son's military appointment. The Mamluks arrived in their finest regalia, treated with the utmost respect. As the celebration ended, they were led down a narrow, high-walled passage called Bab al-Azab. Suddenly, the gates were locked. Trapped in the shadows, over 400 Mamluk leaders were gunned down by soldiers stationed on the walls above. In a single afternoon, an entire political class was erased. The transition of power has often been lubricated by such carnage. In 750 AD, during the rise of the Abbasid Caliphate, Abdullah bin Ali lured 80 princes of the fallen Umayyad dynasty to a banquet at Abu Futros, promising reconciliation. As the guests began to eat, executioners entered the hall and clubbed the princes to death. The horror did not end with the killing. The Abbasid hosts reportedly spread heavy leather mats over the bodies of the dying and continued their feast on top of them, dining to the sound of their victims' final groans. Vengeance, too, wears the mask of hospitality. In the 10th century, after the Drevlians murdered Prince Igor of Kiev, his widow, Princess Olga, orchestrated a multi-layered retaliation. When the Drevlians sent emissaries to propose a marriage between her and their prince, she welcomed them into a bathhouse, only to lock the doors and burn them alive. She then traveled to their lands for a funeral feast, plying 5,000 Drevlian soldiers with wine until they collapsed in a stupor.
While they slept, her troops slaughtered every one of them. Not all massacres require immediate death to achieve their goal. In ancient Rome, Emperor Domitian used a black banquet to instill absolute psychological terror in the Senate. He invited his critics to a hall painted entirely in black, lit by black candles, where each guest found a gravestone carved with their own name behind their chair. After a night of discussing methods of execution, he let them live, proving that the fear of death is sometimes a more effective tool of control than death itself. In Renaissance Italy, Cesare Borgia used the Banquet of Senigallia in 1502 to eliminate rebellious generals. He greeted them with a warm embrace, only to have them arrested the moment they entered his palace. 2 were strangled with musical strings that very night. Religion and politics collided in 1572 during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France. A royal wedding intended to signal peace between Catholics and Protestants drew thousands of high-ranking Huguenots to Paris. After days of feasting, church bells signaled a pre-planned attack. The guests were murdered in their beds, turning the streets of Paris into rivers of blood. Finally, the Stockholm bloodbath of 1520 saw King Christian II of Denmark lure the Swedish nobility to a coronation banquet under the guise of an amnesty. After 3 days of celebration, the doors were bolted. Over 80 nobles and clergy were tried for heresy on the spot and executed, their blood flooding the city square. These events reframe our understanding of power. They remind us that the most dangerous place isn't always the battlefield. It is often the table where you are told you are safe. In the pursuit of absolute control, the The ultimate luxury isn't the feast itself, it is the total vulnerability of one's enemies.